Hi, Show here today. Thanks for joining me as we get into the Bible. Just as a reminder, if you're a first-time visitor, I encourage you to go to my website so you kind of understand what the strategy is and what our ultimate goal is for this website or for these videos. If you have been visiting and watching a few of the videos, I hope you're starting to feel comfortable getting into the Bible, just you alone and listening to God. So with all of that, let's go ahead and just jump in right to our lesson today, which is Matthew 3. We are looking at it, just as a reminder, through the lens of elevating man over God or elevating God over man, and which one do we tend to do on a regular basis. So in Matthew 3, we meet the great messenger John the Baptist, who is known to a lot of people, even some that are outside of the Christian circles, just because he's such a popular guy. He carried a very important message as part of his ministry, and that was to be ready because the Messiah was at hand and make straight his paths. And that was actually prophesied in the Old Testament, which is written in this stretch of Scripture. So here we have a great man with a great message. But as soon as we establish that point that he's kind of announcing Jesus, it goes into his appearance. And it says, John the Baptist lived in the wilderness, and he dressed in camel hair with a belt. I figure what prompted me, or what I thought of, is probably if everybody dressed like that, why would they need to say that? So that told me that John the Baptist probably looked a little bit different than the people you would think would have a message from God to give the people about Jesus. You would ordinarily think that the Pharisees or the scribes or, some, high up in the religious circles of the day would be the ones having this message and giving it to the people. But no, it was a man who wore clothes that weren't the typical clothes of his people. And on top of that, he ate crickets. There's probably places in the world, and maybe back then, that did do it, but I don't think that was the order of business. It certainly isn't today, so I'd probably raise a few eyebrows. Someone trying to give me a message from God that ate crickets, but maybe not after reading through the Bible with God in this stretch. Anyway, he was just different. He looked a little bit different. So where that took my mind was the fact that not everybody that has a message from God is going to look exactly like me. They're not going to dress the same. They might not do things the same. They might do things a little bit more unorthodox. But that doesn't mean they don't have a message. Because obviously John the Baptist had a huge message, and he was quite different from most of the people in his culture of the day. Now, as I read this, I was reminded of a retreat that I attended many, many years ago. And I went with you probably could categorize this as church ladies. We went, and we were in a mainstream denomination at the time, and it was a quiet one with a quiet, very organized type of worship and all that kind of good stuff. Well, the lady that was putting on this retreat was more of the charismatic flavor. She came from a different denomination, and we didn't know that. Well, it was a big surprise for me because I had never been around anything like that. My friend, not so much, because she had been around it a little bit more. But so we go to this, and the first night, I'm like, whoa, what's that? And oh, I've never heard that. And oh my, this is different. I've never been anything like this. So my eyes were quite open, but I went back the next day, even though it was still kind of different, and I was still a little bit leery. But the second evening, we had a guest speaker. So the lady that was organizing it, when she introduced her, she said, she goes, I see our guest speaker is here. So we all turned to the back of the room where she's entering into the door. And it's this very tall, statuesque woman. And she is quite glittery in appearance. She's wearing gold tone, satin, shimmery fabric and glitter clothes. And she's got her hair all the way down to her waist, maybe even below it. And it's in cornrows. And then she's got these fingernails this long. And she was wearing high heels, as if she wasn't tall enough. As it was, she was wearing high heels, which she had to have at least been 7 feet tall. Well, she walked in, and I'm thinking, oh my, I've never seen a Christian speaker, appear quite like that. But immediately I thought of John the Baptist, and I thought, well, you know what? John the Baptist, he looked a little bit different than the people, the religious leaders of his day. So you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to listen to what this lady has to say. Well, I stayed there that night, and by the time our session was over for the evening, it was time to go. I had a lot of questions that were unanswered, and I really was feeling unsettled because I really wanted to know more about what this lady had to say, this message, and what I had experienced that night and everything. Well, as it would happen, the venue was about 20 miles outside of the town where my friend and I were staying. If you'll excuse me if I look a little bit fidgety, I think there's ants around here where I've plopped down. And I've already seen one snake today, so the critters are out. So if I look a little fidgety, that's why. But anyway, so back to the venue. Me and my friend, we weren't staying at the venue. We were staying at her house, which was about 20 miles in a town, 20 minutes away. Well, we got out to go get in the car, and she locked the keys in the car. And she was, she was not very happy with herself. But I said, no. I said, maybe the evening's not supposed to be finished yet. I said, God's probably got something going on. So we go back in. Everybody's just kind of milling around, and we tell them what's happened and that we need a ride back to town. Well, it just so happens that this woman with the long fingernails and the cornrows and the glittery clothes is the only one driving back to town that night. So, man, we jump on that, and I got to quiz her all the way back into town. And I got all the answers to things, and I found out that even though she looked different than me, she was in a different denomination than me. A lot of the things, or the things, not a lot of it, but all of the things that she had said and done that night were very biblical. And so my mind was at ease, and that reminder after reading the scripture was a good reminder, because people look a lot different today. And not to say that my appearance is going to look like them or their appearance, or that they even want to look like me or I want to look like them, but that's a good reminder that God gave me, that not to judge a book by their cover. We elevate God over man when we set aside our own prejudice, our own, what we're used to, and things like that. When we let our thoughts get ahead and maybe, get in the way of a message that God has for us, we've successfully elevated ourselves and man over God, which we really don't want to do that. So anyway, this was just a good reminder for me. It's also a reminder, if you turn that around, sometimes God asks us to look a little bit different than those around us. Maybe something that might look a little bit odd and strange to those. And you know what? It doesn't have to be clothes. Sometimes when we forgive somebody, that looks way different. Pardon me. That looks way different. Sometimes when we love somebody, that's another Christian might think, oh, that person's unlovable. We've just elevated God over man by loving on that person, and maybe can be an example to that person who has a little bit harder time showing that love or showing forgiveness to somebody, that it looks a little bit different than they are expecting. We not only grow when we take a message from someone that is different or does things differently than us, as long as it's biblical, but when we do it, we can maybe be an example to someone else who has that little bit of hurdle to get over. So that's what I took from it. And as I just went ahead, I got my message pretty quick in the beginning of Matthew, but I read to the end, and I love that this man who looked so different, he looked different than the Pharisees, he acted different than the Pharisees and the scribes and all that. He was the one who actually baptized Jesus Christ into the beginning of his ministry. So anyway, as always, I would love your comments either here, on YouTube or over on my website. The link is down in the description. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope more than anything that you're finding a comfort level getting into the Bible by yourself and seeing what God has to say to you directly as we get into the Bible. Thanks. Have a great day, and I hope to see you next time when we hop into Matthew 4.